All right, welcome to Polaris. Today we have Alexis Walsko from Lola Red. Before we get started, we have a couple housekeeping items. First and foremost, this is a discussion. We are live. Please ask any questions. Feel free to just chat in the question box or the chat box, and we will try to get to them and weave them through the conversation. Second, we are on Twitter at AnyRoad, or you can mention it, hashtag Polaris by AnyRoad. You can fix the audio settings on Zoom through the bottom left of your screen. And lastly, we are recording this, and we will share the recording once we're done. All right. Welcome to Polaris by AnyRoad. It's a series of interviews with marketing leaders on how to build impactful, lasting relationships with consumers. I'm Daniel Yaffe, Chief Operating Officer and co-founder here at AnyRoad. By the way, that song that was playing as you walked in was AnyRoad by George Harrison, so hopefully you enjoyed that. For those of you who are less familiar with AnyRoad, we were founded in 2012, and we're an experiential data platform for brands to scale and optimize customer experiences that change behavior. Brands like Anheuser-Busch, Michaels, Fisker, and Dick's Sporting Goods all count on AnyRoad for everything from activations to tours to classes. If your brand is investing in experiential, please check out our website at anyroad.com, or you can reach out to talk to us. Our guest today is Alexis Walsko, owner and founder at Lola Red PR. Alexis, welcome.
Hi, Daniel. How are you?
I'm good. So excited to have you on today.
Thank you for having me. It looks like you're in a really fun place.
I am. I'm in New Mexico at the moment. Where are you calling in from?
I'm in Minneapolis today. So that is our headquarters, and I'm actually in our office today, which is refreshing.
Nice. Fantastic. Well, I'd love for you to start and just tell us about Lola Red. Why Lola Red? How did you get started? Tell us a little bit more about the PR firm.
Good question. So Lola Red is a PR firm, which now we call a digital PR firm. I started it at the age of 22, and I started it in Boulder, Colorado. And it was an internship where I taught myself how to do PR and how to get it wasn't my client at the time, but it was my boss in national magazines. And I sort of moved that work into a business at a very young age. It's called Lola Red because when I decided at 22 to start my own firm, Alexis Walsko, although it's my name, it doesn't really roll. And I thought it was a little pretentious to put that name on the door or on the wall. And so I was driving to a job that I hated at the time and thinking of things that I love. I love Madonna. Her daughter's nickname is Lola. And my favorite color, well, actually, no, that's a lie. Not my favorite color was not red. I drove a red car. And so at the time I had someone draw a cartoon character, and that became Lola Red. So that's our name, and it has stuck. And I will say throughout the ages, I have vacillated, and do I love it? Do I hate it? Do we just go by initials? But now I will say after 20 years, it's here and it's stuck, and it's what we're going to stay with.
Fantastic. I love that origin story. And speaking of stories, I know that there's a story about bike riding in Sardinia with Richard Branson that plays into the genesis of the company. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how maybe it influenced you in starting the company? And then we'll dive in a little bit deeper.
Yeah. Well, I will say one of my favorite quotes is "Leap and the net will appear." So good news, bad news, basically never ask me for advice because I'm going to tell you to do whatever it is you're asking me. I don't have a no button. And so when I was connected to the Branson family, I'd gone to Necker Island, which is an amazing experience, with a group. And part of this group, the year after I went to Necker, asked if I wanted to be part of a nonprofit sort of physical challenge that Richard was doing with his kids and some other people to raise money. And there were a couple of different legs of the challenge that you could choose. I said yes right away, but I didn't realize that what I said yes to was a 240-mile bike race from the bottom point of Sardinia, Italy to the northern point. And I was so naive at the time. I didn't even know that Sardinia was Italy. I was like not paying attention. I thought I was going to Greece. So I had no clue. And I also like did not ride a road bike. So I had 7 weeks to train. But
Wow.
what ended up happening was that I rode this incredible ride with Richard Branson, his kids, and about 40 other people. And there were other people that joined this trek along the way. So Simon Sinek is part of it. Sarah Blakely of Spanx is part of this group as well. And it's a really super passionate group, but it's also pretty amazing to be that close. And I think over the course of a year and a half, I spent 10 days with Richard Branson, which that few people can say that with he and his family. And the inspiration is really amazing. And to me, sitting here today talking to you about PR and with your expertise and experience, it's really kind of interesting because he is a king of experience. He's also a king of sort of experiential PR stunts.
Yeah.
Which was a fun conversation to have with him over the many days and what he's going to do next. So
yeah, I love it. I love it. So when we dive into the world of PR, I know a lot of people are attending because obviously it's all about PR and experiences today. I'm curious, beyond the branding and the messaging and telling that story, how is PR changing for brands that are using experiences?
Well, I think PR is changing just about as quickly as the world is changing right now. And if you're living in it like I am, the world is changing constantly. And I think PR opportunities for many brands significantly evolved over the past year, but even in the past 6 months, when you look at what we were dealing with traditional earned media opportunities, even in the media opportunities for your brand experiences were minimized because of politics. So because the political spectrum from, I'd say about July to January, that was taking up 75% of just the news percentage.
Wow.
But you could get coverage if you had some sort of tie into that.
Yeah, interesting.
And then you put the pandemic on top of it, that opportunities were really reduced. And actually, if I can share some of the ways that we were able to get PR coverage during that time
that'd be
for our clients that had experiences, was that we had to talk and serve the people that were in need at the time. So we were needing to, so we did a whole program with one of our clients for doctors, a whole doctor relief program that was last summer. And that actually helped our client to get in the news. Some of it was deliberate, some wasn't. That's how we were able to get it. But it's so different today than it was a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because in that span of time, you could literally do a PR release and get in the New York Times, and it would roll your company for 5 years.
That's so interesting.
And it just isn't that way.
Yeah. Interesting. Pulling it back to experiences, I'm curious, you've been in the PR world for a very long time. I'm curious how experiences have changed, or the role of experiences in PR strategy have changed over time. A lot of people say that we're stepping into an experience economy, that consumers want experiences more than things or objects. I'm curious how that plays into PR and how the strategy has changed.
Well, experiences are part of a company's PR story. So I think there's a couple of ways that it would play into PR in the past. In the past, you would have an editorial experience. So it was in PR, whether it was a stunt like Richard Branson would do of like jumping out of a hot air balloon, or it was part of the service that you were providing to your customers, was part of their experience. And that was the story that we would then dish up. So the former, that jump out of the air balloon, that would have trickle down through the media outlets. The latter was the story that we would be telling over and over and over to get consumers interested. And it is, today it is just different because you have to be relevant to people.
Yeah, 100%. What brands do you see that are doing that really well, that are using experiences to be relevant to consumers?
There are a lot of people that are doing it well. I think who I can speak to the best is some of the companies that we have done work with. Awesome. So I know something you and I have talked about, and it's interesting, is Restoration Hardware, which now goes by RH. Their whole, they have a whole PR experience. So put that in one side. And that's what they would do for editors and influencers, but then their whole consumer experience has really evolved as well. So Restoration Hardware, it used to be a store in a mall. Whereas now it has evolved to, they don't just have stores, they have galleries. Yeah. Again, change their name, Restoration Hardware, now RH. Yeah. But these galleries are multi-level, 600,000 to 100,000 square feet. Wow. They either are custom new builds or in cities like Chicago, they went into an old building in Chicago. They went into some that had really historical significance in a neighborhood. But then the experience that they're building in that is that they added a restaurant. Oh, interesting. So that when you go to buy a sofa, and you're going to buy a $6,000 to $10,000 sofa from RH, but you are living that life, so that you are going in, you are drinking the awesome Bellini, you are having the meal. I'm not going to lie, it makes it a lot easier to spend $6,000 on a sofa. Absolutely. I think it's interesting, especially now in the middle of the pandemic. A lot of brands, a lot of our clients are coming to us saying, we have this physical footprint. Now we have to get people back in the store, as we're getting through the pandemic. And it's interesting, and brands are saying, well, how do we use this and to make it so it's not just transactional, right? To your point, it's actually building that relationship. That's really interesting. But that's also, they will come to a point, they will come, because it is challenging to buy a $6,000. So it's challenging to buy any sofa online because you miss the comfort, you miss sort of seeing the size, envisioning it in your space. So that's a super easy example. Interesting. But I think there are also, something that we miss, especially in retail, is expertise. It's really challenging to get expertise online. Yeah. So, and you think about buying something, I'm going far out there, and probably a little bit over my skis, which that's okay. But in thinking about sporting goods. Yeah. So you want to buy a kayak, you can buy a kayak that's $99 or $9,000 probably. But in that purchase, you can have it delivered to your home. You can actually have a great online experience, but it is going in and talking to someone and learning, what size paddle you need, what size boat, all of those things. And those are really important experiences that I think that consumers still need through a retail experience. 100%. We work with Dick's Sporting Goods and Golf Galaxy, and it's the same thing, right? They're pulling people in for demos, for appointments, really engaging consumers in their stores. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about brands that you've worked with and some of your favorite experiential campaigns that Lola Red's actually created. Yeah. Do you want a Shinola story? I think you probably know. Yeah, that'd be great. Shinola story. They are one of my favorites. Such a great company. And we started with them very early on. Awesome. And so Shinola had, I was going to say, if you could just give feedback, like context of what is Shinola, if we have any listeners. Oh, good. So Shinola started as a watch company. And what's interesting about them is that they decided that they were going to make watches and that they were going to make them in Detroit. Because at the time, Detroit was a city that had just been super hard hit by the economy. This was probably 2008. So at that time, there were a bunch of out of work automakers and they reskilled these people to make watches.
Cool.
And then they developed this awesome, cool brand around it. And this awesome, cool brand around it was Shinola. And what they decided for their brand was that they really wanted their brand to have foundation, to have depth, to not just be cool on your wrist, but to be cool to the depths of their core, which was really about made in America. So as they started announcing locations for stores, what they decided to do was, as outside of Detroit, was that they wanted to go into those cities and really be a part of those cities. So as they came to Minneapolis, again, my backyard, they actually got involved with the governor and the mayor. And they really wanted to partner because they also wanted to see who were companies that they could help here.
Interesting.
So, and be part of that coming to the city, helping what it was more a downtown area. So before Shinola even opened their doors of a retail store in the downtownish area of Minneapolis, they had pre-events where, again, they brought the governor, they brought the founder of Shinola, and they told the story of how they resurrected a city. And so that was, I mean, that really attaches to your heart.
Right.
And gives you like a lot of pride in the watch that you were wearing. And that also helped them to have raving fans so that then when they opened up their physical location, and they replicated this in many cities, that physical location, of course, they had the big shiny PR party, but then they also brought in another element to their retail that was the experience element. So they partnered with a local coffee purveyor and they put in an espresso bar. So you could go in and buy a $600 watch or $1,000 bike or a really cool leather wallet or notebook. And you also could get a cup of coffee and just sit there and be around like-minded people who liked the same brand that you did.
That's awesome. I love that. I think it's really interesting pulling in the PR side of telling a story. That it sounds like that is a really important part of experiences in PR, right? It's not just throwing the party. It's not just creating the event or the class, but it's making sure that the storyline is there throughout the whole journey. Is that right?
You have to have a story. And so, and that's what's behind PR. And so, I mean, that's what PR is. So when we start our jobs on our side of marketing and branding, it's digging down into what are those stories? And I will tell you the easiest, best stories to tell are when they have people involved.
Yeah.
So I love the work that you have done with Michaels.
Yeah, absolutely.
And bringing in the local, are they the makers?
Yeah, the makers, absolutely.
So bringing in the makers, but that's a people story. And so bringing it from that experience that you helped to create, that you can give you can give this experience to your consumers. That's kind of also, you can take it one step further and give that a PR angle.
Yeah, interesting.
And that's because you have all of the people that are involved in it.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Prior to this, you and I were talking that a lot of it was, if it's events without that story, it's just an event. It's just a party. And I think consumers want something different now. They want that story. They want that personal connection.
Well, and I think that's been evolution. So I'm not going to go back the 20 years that I started in PR, but I would say, I mean, 20 years ago, we threw a lot of parties just for party's sake.
Yeah.
And then we got into a lot of parties with purpose to try to explain things to people and educate, and people got a little burned out on that. What I'm excited about today is that I think now events and experiences really have to be about where we're meeting people. And before we used to ask them to come just to us, whereas today we have to really think about where they are.
Interesting.
And where they are in their lives to be able to serve them.
Tell me more. Like, what does that look like? What does that look like in the next, maybe post-COVID in the next few years?
What does it look like? Years ago, just put it 2 years ago.
Yeah.
2 years ago, you could open, we can use a Shinola store. Open a Shinola store, invite a bunch of people to come. They'd be happy to come, have a glass of wine. There'd be a lot of people there and they'd be okay with it. Today, no one's going to stay anywhere for super long and they want to know the why. Yeah. So what is getting them out of their home? They're excited to get out of their homes, but give them more reason to do it so that, say you're a Shinola store or any other store, it is giving them the customer service experience. Mm-hmm. It is giving them the opportunity to see things that maybe they couldn't see online. Because right now, where we've been living is in a box this big.
Totally. Interesting.
That might be a bit vague. You could push me harder on that one.
Yeah, no. I get that. I mean, I think it is about, I mean, it's that pull, right? It's what is going to pull consumers, right? In the past, maybe some free booze, a party would pull that consumer, but I think that's table stakes now. I think people value their time and really want to connect with brands. So I totally agree. I want to shift the conversation a little bit. We're an experiential data company. So I want to talk about data and measurement. I'm curious.
It's like my least favorite conversation to have. That's why I love that you geek out on it, because it's kind of the conversation I've been running from for 20 years. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. I mean, so that begs the question, when it comes to measurement and success, how has PR generally been measured over the last 20 years in your career? And then do you see that changing? And do you see that changing with experiences at all?
Absolutely. So where we were, which I thought then we were looking for a lot of data, is that we would measure based on impressions. Mm-hmm. So like very simple, also ridiculously inaccurate, like ridiculous thing to even calculate things on. So we would share ad equivalencies and impressions with our clients, which you can swing those numbers however you want. I'm not saying we did that, but we had tools that would measure things, whereas one day you'd have $1 million ad equivalency, the next day was 40,000. So there was no real rhyme or reason, but clients wanted to know that. We have evolved and people need companies like yours, which you didn't ask me to say that. But now the data and the measurement model, it is everything. Impressions still are there, but impact is there. Yeah. Sentiment is there. We are now, from a PR perspective, responsible, and I think this is super difficult, but responsible for sales. Totally. Return on investment. Right. When we run influencer campaigns, we have an equation that is about your return on influence. It's still not perfect science, but the measurement element of it, we are so much more integrated into the company as a whole than we ever were.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We always say that brands historically have always measured with the 3 I's, right? So intuition. We know this works. We know if we engage with Alexis, she's going to love our products. Image. So here's a picture of Alexis drinking our bourbon, and that's great. Isn't that wonderful? And that'll make it to the CMO. And impressions. So exactly that. We see that all changing as well, really into these 3-dimensional impact metrics, as you mentioned. That's super interesting. I want to make sure we're going to get to questions momentarily. If you do have questions, please just chat them in and we will try to weave them in.
I do have to say, I can see Michael Young, he's in the chat. And he said, it's a beautiful irony that an American shoe polish brand from the 1870s is now a luxury movement. It's right. So he brings up the point. It used to be a saying, you didn't know something from Shinola. And that was truly where the name came from, was this sort of saying that then they turned into a brand.
Yeah.
So it's fun that Michael knows that story.
That's awesome. And again, it's the storyline, right? I mean, going back to what we were saying earlier, is pulling that story thread through these experiences.
But here's what's interesting about a company like Shinola. They didn't choose that storyline. That's an easy one. So that's an easy one because people had heard that term for so long. And what they chose to do is write their own story, which was about the betterment for the country. And that was going to be what they were going to put their flag in the ground for, which also, as you think from a consumer, that's actually a story that makes me want a $600 watch.
Totally.
Versus having it be from a funny saying from way back when.
Right. That's funny. One question, getting into the measurement aspect, when you look back or when you're talking to a client, how do you know if something was successful, especially on the experience side of the house?
Oh, Daniel, I would love to say, because everybody was talking about it. But that's not the reality anymore. But that used to be what it was. And today it truly does for us. If someone is not working with you, we are responsible or have to play into the sales perspective of things and what is happening in sales.
Yeah, it's super interesting how that's all meshing together, right? It's no longer just the PR, get the word out here, and hopefully it'll impact sales on the other side. We see that as well in a big way.
But it is also these experiences, and this is, take this outside of the party. It is your experience from how you meet people in a retail store to how you deliver their product at home. That is what is bringing people back.
Totally. For us, we think about the R in ERM is this category that we've really spearheaded, experience relationship management. It's the R, the relationship that brands need to be building.
Yes, but also that's actually the meet me. That is the answer to meet me where you are.
I love that.
You know what I mean? Because once you figure out where they are and you can find them there right now, because people we're trepidatious.
Yeah.
And we're gonna be for a little while. There's not so much leaping.
Right.
So if you can figure out where they are and make them a little bit uncomfortable and then give them more than they ever expected, you will win.
It's awesome. I saw somebody raise their hand. Please just chat in if you have a question and we'll get to it. Before we do dive into some questions, and there were a couple that were pre-submitted, are there any campaigns that you're currently working on or planning that you're able to share that you're most excited about?
Yeah, there's one. When you think of mattresses, there is a company, they're actually out of Detroit as well. Why am I in Minnesota? And I have so many Detroit stories. We work with a mattress company called Reverie.
Okay.
And Reverie make these incredible custom mattresses. And some of this predated us. We are now the storytellers for it, but they decided they were sleep experts, which I think is kind of interesting because I don't know about you, but I was up 5 times last night. And so what they decided to do was, one, they have a sleep expert hotline.
Oh, interesting.
So that you can call a phone line and it will be a Reverie sleep expert and they will coach you through sleeping and what you can do to perfect that. But also what they decided to do, and this is the storytelling element, is that there are people in their corporate offices, like their chief marketing officer, who they are sleep experts too.
Interesting.
So to me, that is super interesting because that has progressed from, I can get a mattress that shows up in a box in my front door, to, I have someone who is solution-based, who's helping me in my life, which I think as we talk about experiences, that solution element is super important to experiences moving forward.
I love that. I was just thinking, is the hotline 24 hours? I can only imagine calling in the middle of the night.
Let's just say yes.
It should be.
If not, you can just call my cell phone because I'm probably up.
Perfect. You'll be the sleep expert. No, that's great. That's really interesting. So I want to hear a little bit more about what you guys as Lola Red are doing. Where does the PR point come in? Is it getting the message out of what they're doing and the story that they're creating? I'm curious how that weaves into more traditional PR.
They were doing this before we were there. And that's actually something that I love about, I love about my company. Of course, I should love everything. But when we started and still where we are today, I think sometimes you have to meet a brand where they are.
Totally.
So where a lot of times PR firms go in and say, oh, like we have to change this and change this. What was super cool about Reverie, they were always doing these great things. It's just that nobody knew. And the thing that I always say about PR is nobody knows how great you are unless you tell them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are the cheerleaders and we are the messengers for what they're already doing. That's great. There are other times, like actually in the case, I'm going to use Red Bull as an example, who's been another client where they know that they want the big splash. Mm-hmm. They know that they want, they know the tools that they have at their disposal, but they don't know what they want to use, what they want to do. So we have to dream up things. So one time we dreamt up that to announce their big event, Flutog, we were going to skydive in the mayor to a press conference. So set up a press conference, had all of the people, all of the media, and people are like, well, where's the mayor? Well, he's up there coming down with the Red Bull. What are they called? The Air Force team.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But that's how sometimes I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah.
That's how we have to work is take things that are there and then also sometimes just invent news.
Yeah, that's interesting. No, I guess what I'm hearing is there's two sides. There's the experience itself as news.
Absolutely.
So letting people know that this brand is driving these kinds of experiences. And then sometimes the experience is the PR as well. And so there's both sides of that.
Well, and there's I think that side two, that sort of experience as being news, that's also what we had to dream up to get news. So like think of the evolution of that. So before, let's talk about beer. Perfect. So you have a beer client.
We have several, yeah.
You have several beer clients. And I happen to be in our old office, which somebody way back when painted a Miller High Life advertisement on the wall, which is what I'm standing in front of. Say it's Miller. Say this is an advertisement for the champagne of beers.
Oh, I was going to ask if that was Lola Red in the background.
Nope. It's just the Miller High Life girl. But so say they're launching Miller and the champagne of beers. What you could do in the world 2 years ago is that you'd think of media and influencers, and you could, number one, you could bring them somewhere to taste the beer, throw them a great party, have music, have a great time. That would trickle down to, yay, champagne of beers is coming out. Consumers would get excited because they'd be like, oh my God, Tom Brady's drinking. This is like way off brand. Remember, this is imaginary. Like Tom Brady was at a party drinking whatever. But now you think about it today, and people are not as willing to do that. But you think, what makes it the champagne of beers? And today you have to meet people where they're at, who they're with. So you have to send them the beer tasting experience, which isn't really just sending them a beer. It's sending them the bottle of hops so that they can taste what the inspiration was, the difference in the water. Say it's water from the mountains versus water from my tap in Minneapolis. But send them those sorts of things to tell the story. So you have to deconstruct the elements. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. I love that. I always think about, in that example, sometimes telling the story is educational, right? And a lot of our clients use education as a form of experience because it's something that will sit with a consumer forever, which is
it does, because it lives with them. And so, and it attaches to their hearts, and it makes them have a relationship and a memory of you.
Exactly.
So if I can go to Michael's and relearn how to crochet, that's super interesting to me. My grandma taught me, I probably blacked it out.
Yeah,
But
no,
to relearn, to do that and be able to create, that is part of my life experience.
That's huge. That's awesome. Let's go to a couple of questions. We only have about 7 minutes left. But a couple of questions here. This one's from Alex Alequin. How do you create experiences during a pandemic for potential customers?
This was a nightmare a year ago.
Yeah.
But it is today, I think that it's been amazing. I think you can do it in location, out of location. The most popular has been delivery to people's homes.
Interesting.
It is not perfect. In terms of whatever experience you're delivering, you literally have to deliver everything in a box. And the best way to do it is to deliver things that are not expected. So the surprise and delight. For some reason, the kayak example comes up. And maybe it's because I bought a kayak from Dick's.
Oh, cool.
And so I'm like, how can I experience a kayak? Like the kayak could have been delivered to my house with like actually a cool beer for after I was done kayaking. That might be a bad example too. But with all of the accoutrements, because I couldn't just buy the kayak, I had to buy the life preserver and the paddle, and probably should get some waterproof shoes. So then to do a partnership with Tiva so that you're delivering all of those things. You have to think through every single detail, which is super different than before the pandemic. And you have to think of safety first, because not only you think of social distance as a 6-foot bubble, in reality, from consumer to retailer, that bubble's a lot bigger.
Yeah, interesting. Do you think that's going to change very quickly as people are vaccinated? Or do you think there's going to be some remnant elements from that approach?
I think that there are going to be remnants. I think that, but I also think it's because we consume differently.
Yeah.
So that isn't just because somebody did it well or someone did it poorly. It is that our standards have changed so dramatically.
Yeah.
And so I think this is sort of the new normal. And the thing that I love is thinking about retail and the evolution of retail and all of these retail locations and what we are going to do with them, and figuring out how we can bring the experience, so what you do, of when you buy things to people so that they can go and try, yet get it at home. And you think of like what's the menswear company who their stores, you couldn't take home anything, you just went and tried on the clothes. Is that Bonobos?
Yeah, I think Bonobos did that. Yeah.
So, but they were like a little bit before their time 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But now, like, that is the new normal. Like, let me go see, touch it, but I don't want to have to carry it.
Right.
And then I can get it at home.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've seen a whole bunch of companies that some of them digital first, right? Like the Warby Parkers of the world, digital first, built physical retail locations for an experience. So people could touch the products, engage with it, and then ship it to you later on. We're seeing more and more of that as well.
What do you think is going to happen? So Warby Parker is actually a great example. I am in awe because every time I walk past one of their stores, they are packed.
Yeah.
Even today. What's going to happen there?
Post-pandemic.
Why is it glasses? Why is that the one thing?
Well, I think there is something about touching it and seeing yourself in it. You know, I mean, that is an experience in and of itself. And I think some products are going to lend themselves better to that kind of experience. But that, I mean, they created an experience at home before they created the experience in store. Right. I mean, it's what Zappos did. Zappos doesn't have a physical location. I mean, not really.
No, but their shoes get to me overnight.
Absolutely. And so they're thinking about that customer experience in your own home, which is fascinating and also super important. And probably they've been doing really well during the pandemic. That's interesting. I've got another question here. We've got time for probably one more after this. If anybody has any, let's see if I can click through. Oh, there are some other questions coming in. How can companies, this is from Lalitha, how can companies create good experiences with small budgets?
Ooh, that's a good one. My answer is gonna be people. So, and that's just coming from my gut. So, because I think when you look at things that take up a lot of money for an experience, that has to do with like what you're giving away, what you are creating in remaking it, in whatever it is, taking over a retail space to put in a mattress installation, that can be really expensive. If you can use people to give that experience and to really equate a company's values, and whether that be, you think of Reverie, an 800 number, or a text or a social media chain, that is not an expensive offering. The expense came in educating people, and then the payoff came in that having those people do the work. So I hope that that answers that question, but I think that it is some sort of human to human interaction, because also you think in the world of the bots that are answering our questions online, when you have someone who can give you great service, it's a game changer.
100%. I would actually add to this. We're seeing a lot of our clients create experiences that are actually paid experiences. So whether they drive revenue or not, at least they can actually pay for themselves.
I like
so if
that.
you think about brands like Johnny Walker does a lot of experiences. They're paid because people are happy to join that experience. We are seeing more and more of this as well. Again, it doesn't have to be an expensive experience, but at scale, it starts to help cover the costs.
There's also something that I like about that, in that is, if it is paid, it also becomes a guaranteed experience. Which, remember how I talked about that sort of people are not willing to take this gigantic leap?
Yeah.
Which, if it is paid, I know what I'm getting. I can probably find a review on it. My friend will tell me about it. It's not just some, maybe go and see it and see how it works out.
Yeah, no,
that's cool. That's really smart.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think the trend's going to continue as well. I think the goal that we're seeing is, how do brands create experiences that people really, really want to join, right? So much so that it has value to it.
And people want things that they can't access.
Keep it special.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's to your Johnny Walker. That's a perfect example. Give me access to try something that I can't get my hands on otherwise.
Totally. I know we're just about out of time. Lalitha actually had another question here that I love. How do brands build PR experiences for older versus millennial and Gen Z consumers? Curious.
That is the best question. And it's actually super top of mind for me. Because we are putting together a campaign for, we are working with influencers that are 50 plus, which 50 is like not old. So like, don't read into that. But plus is that, how do you build it? Again, go back to meet them where they are, but also remember this, they as an audience, they haven't been a targeted audience for experiences in so long, if ever.
Yeah.
So you can easily charm them and give them things, because if you think about where marketing has been, we've been targeting the youth on Instagram.
Yeah.
And if you look at an older demographic, we haven't been talking to them.
Yeah, interesting.
So to take really great care of them and to go back and give them people service, which if you think about what is frustrating them in the world today, it's that they have to live online where they haven't had to live before.
Right.
So take them out of that and they are willing to go.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you see big differences in the real life experiences that are driven for other generations rather than Gen Z, for example?
I think I think that the difference will be their response.
Mm.
Because to your point, and actually that paid sort of, whether it's exclusive or unique paid guaranteed experience, they would be into.
Interesting.
They would be into.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. We are out of time, Alexis, but thank you so much for joining. This has been awesome. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for brands or companies that might be joining today as far as how to approach experiences in their PR strategy?
I have one piece of advice. Now is the time. So the coolest thing that has happened in the past year is that we all kind of started at zero, because the playing field was leveled, and now we're at this super cool time where I think for people to be doing and trying these things, there's actually no better time. And they have the opportunity to stand out. And if they can work with a group like you, that you did not ask me to say this, but to measure the results, that tool was never available.
Yeah, awesome.
So to be able to do that, it is a powerful time. This is not the time to hold back. This is the time to press go.
Awesome. Love that advice. Thank you so much, Alexis. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you everybody for joining as well.